The courtroom air was thick with the scent of stale coffee and betrayal. Emir Vance, the wife, sat rigid, clutching a manila folder like a shield. Opposite her, the man she once loved, attorney Ricky Vance, smirked, his hand resting familiarly on the knee of the woman who destroyed their marriage, Serafina Hayes. When the judge mentioned alimony, Serafina let out a loud, mocking laugh, a sound that sliced through the silence. Ricky just shrugged. They thought they had won. They thought Amaya was a fool, but they hadn't accounted for the small, innocuous USB drive tucked deep inside that folder. In the next stunning moments, that laugh would turn into a gut-wrenching sob, as the cold, hard truth of their private lives was broadcast for the world, and the judge to see. The mahogany bar separating the spectators from the legal players felt less like a boundary and more like a battle line. On one side, Emir Vance, 42, impeccably dressed in a tailored charcoal suit, a choice made to project control she barely felt, sat beside her lawyer, Miss Evelyn Reed, a woman whose reputation for quiet, surgical precision in family law was legendary in Boston. On the other side, Ricky Vance, 50, an established real estate attorney whose slicked-back hair and custom-made Italian suit spoke volumes about his success, despite his current moral failings. Next to him was his own attorney, and, conspicuously, the cause of the entire proceedings, Serafina Hayes. Serafina was a stunning 28, dressed in a fashionable pale blue silk dress that seemed deliberately chosen to highlight Emir's more severe attire. She wore a self-satisfied expression, a slight upturn of the lips that Emir recognized as the smirk of a spoiled child getting their way. She and Ricky had been inseparable in public for months, since he moved out of the grand colonial home they had spent 20 years building together. Now they sat less than 10 feet away, their bodies angled toward each other, displaying a casual intimacy that was meant to wound Amaya. And it did. The proceedings were already a disaster for Amaya, at least from a financial standpoint. Ricky, being a savvy lawyer himself, had systematically and legally shielded most of his significant assets: the partnership stake in the firm of Preston, Vance and Associates, the stock portfolio, the Cayman Island Trust. He was arguing for a minimal spousal support package, claiming Emir had ample opportunity to restart her career after their children, Jack and Clara, had grown, a career she had willingly set aside for his professional ascent and their family life. Mrs. Vance, Ricky's attorney, Mr. Douglas Finch, droned, his voice utterly devoid of emotion. "You have confirmed that you have not been actively employed for a continuous period of 18 years. While we acknowledge your significant contribution to the household, Mr. Vance has proposed a generous 2-year rehabilitative alimony package, structured on a declining scale, which should be more than sufficient to allow you to re-enter the workforce." Emir's hand tightened around the manila folder. "Generous," she whispered, the word laced with acid. Miss Reed leaned in. "Emir, don't take the bait. Let me handle this." Ricky, however, couldn't resist. He leaned toward Serafina, his voice a stage whisper, audible in the near silence of the courtroom. "Generous is an understatement, darling. She'll have to give up the West Elm and get an actual job." Serafina let out a short, sharp burst of laughter, a sound that Emir would forever associate with the complete and utter dismissal of her 20 years of sacrifice. It was this sound, the mistress's laugh, that broke the last thread of Emir's composure. Judge Alistair Croft, a man whose face was a map of judicial fatigue, banged his gavel softly. "Mr. Vance, I must ask you to keep your comments to yourself. We are in a court of law, not a tea party." "Apologies, Your Honor," Ricky said, his expression instantly contrite. but his eyes, when they flashed to Emiya, held a defiant smugness. Ms. Reed rose, her posture demanding attention. "Your Honor, my client's 18 years were spent managing Mr. Vance's entire domestic and social life, essentially serving as his unpaid chief of staff, which was instrumental to the growth of his career and his firm's reputation. Moreover, the proposed agreement is based on Mr. Vance's declared income, which we believe to be significantly understated. We have evidence, circumstantial but compelling, that Mr. Vance has been diverting funds from his personal accounts into a third-party account under the guise of consulting fees to lower his taxable income." Finch scoffed. "Objection, Your Honor. Wild speculation. Mrs. Vance has no financial training, and her claims are baseless." "Sustained," Judge Croft ruled. "Ms. Reed, unless you have irrefutable proof of financial malfeasance, we must proceed with the declared financial statements." It was the moment. The defeat was palpable. Emiya felt her chest constrict. She knew Ricky was hiding money. She knew he and Serafina were already living a luxurious life, funded by his secret accounts. She felt the despair of being outmaneuvered by the very man she had dedicated her life to building up. Ricky caught her eye then, a triumphant gleam in his gaze. He mouthed two silent, devastating words. "It's over." Emiya looked down at the manila folder. Inside, beneath the neatly typed notes, was the simple, metallic glint of a USB drive, a secret gift from her tech-savvy son, Jack, who hated his father for what he had done to his mother. Jack had given her the means. It was up to her to use it. She pushed the folder across the table toward Ms. Reed, pointing discreetly at the small drive. Ms. Reed, ever perceptive, raised an eyebrow, a silent question. Emiya gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. Ms. Reed hesitated for a fraction of a second, then picked up the drive, her fingers brushing the cold metal. She handed it to the bailiff. "Your Honor," Ms. Reed announced, her voice suddenly commanding the entire room, "we have just obtained what we believe is the irrefutable proof you requested, not just of the financial deception, but of the entire, calculated conspiracy to defraud my client. We respectfully request permission to enter this footage into evidence and play a brief, relevant portion now." A hush fell over the room. Ricky and Serafina exchanged a look of bewildered annoyance. Finch leapt to his feet. "Your Honor, we object. This is harassment. We have not had time to review this evidence. It could be anything. Doctored video. An invasion of privacy. This is merely a tactic to delay the inevitable settlement." "On what grounds was this footage obtained, Ms. Reed?" Judge Croft asked, his gaze sharp. "On the grounds of suspicion of financial fraud relating to community property, Your Honor," Ms. Reed replied smoothly. "We believe it illustrates the nature of the relationship and, critically, confirms the financial shell game Mr. Vance has been operating." Judge Croft pondered for a long, agonizing moment. He was sick of this case, sick of the pettiness, but something in Ms. Reed's assured tone and the look of sudden, genuine panic that crossed Ricky's face intrigued him. "Counsel, approach the bench," he ordered. As the lawyers conferred, the bailiff set up a large, retractable screen and connected the USB drive to the courtroom's projector. Serafina whispered loudly to Ricky, "What is this? Is she filming us? She's insane, Ricky. Just an insane, bitter ex-wife." Ricky looked genuinely worried now. "I don't know. She hasn't been acting like this. She's been passive. Serafina, keep quiet." The lawyers returned. Judge Croft sighed, rubbing his temples. "Given the severity of the claims, financial fraud, I will allow the footage to be played for a period not exceeding 3 minutes. If it is irrelevant, Miss Reed, I will hold you in contempt. Proceed." The lights dimmed. Emia felt a surge of terrifying, exhilarating power. She looked at Serafina, who was still wearing that arrogant smirk. The laugh! That was the sound that had sealed their fate. Now it was time for the crying to begin. The screen flickered, and the footage began. The courtroom, moments ago, a sterile environment of legal maneuvering, became a cinema of private betrayal. The image that flooded the screen was not high definition, but it was clear enough. A lavish, modern kitchen. Serafina Hayes's new downtown penthouse, which Ricky claimed was leased in the firm's name for client entertainment. The camera angle, cleverly hidden inside a high-end espresso machine, Jack's genius contribution, provided a wide view of the granite countertop and the expansive cityscape visible through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The date stamp in the corner read 3 weeks prior. The audio, initially muffled by the hum of the refrigerator, suddenly sharpened. Ricky Vance walked into the frame, holding a crystal tumbler of scotch. He was relaxed, tie loosened, a look of profound satisfaction on his face. Serafina followed him, wearing a silk robe. "God, I hate that old house," Ricky muttered, taking a large swallow. "It feels like a museum dedicated to misery. I swear the only thing Amaya ever truly loved was that damn rhododendron bush by the front steps." Serafina giggled, leaning into him. "Well, you won't have to see that bush much longer, Rick. And honestly, she won't even get enough money to buy a new one." Ricky laughed, a harsh, unfamiliar sound. "Exactly. Finch is brilliant. That 2-year package is insultingly low, but completely legally sound based on my declared income. She'll burn through it in 6 months, trying to maintain that lifestyle." This was the first punch. Emia felt a sickening lurch in her stomach, confirming her worst suspicions about his malice. The footage continued. Serafina moved to the counter, pulling out a laptop. "Okay, let's review the Crescent Trust transfer. Did you manage to divert the quarterly bonus from the Preston account?" Ricky nodded, tapping the screen with his finger. "Done. Look, that account, the one registered to Andrew Croft's cousin, Thomas Hayes, is purely a holding tank. When the divorce is finalized, we liquidate, pay Thomas his consultancy fee, a lovely $5,000 for his signature, and it flows right back into the Hayes Investments LLC. The total now stands at," he zoomed in on the screen, his voice dropping slightly, $1.4 million. Untouchable, untraceable community property. A collective, sharp intake of breath echoed through the spectator section. Judge Alistair Croft, the very name Ricky had used as a shield, jolted in his chair. He stared intently at Ricky, a cold, dangerous fury building in his eyes. Ricky, watching the screen, went utterly white. He finally understood the gravity of the situation. This wasn't about an affair. This was about criminal fraud and naming a potential relative of the sitting judge in the scheme. Finch lipped up. "Your Honor, I object. This is entrapment. This footage is illegal. It's highly prejudicial and was clearly obtained without consent in a private residence." Ms. Reed was calm, unyielding. "Your Honor, we argue that the camera was recording community property funds being transferred, and that the conversation recorded clearly demonstrates a concerted criminal effort to defraud my client of marital assets. Furthermore, the mentioning of an individual whose name is remarkably similar to the court's is deeply concerning regarding the integrity of Mr. Vance's ethical obligations as an officer of this court." Judge Croft silenced Finch with a look. "Mr. Finch, sit down. The court is deeply disturbed by the content. We have heard explicit reference to a systematic effort to hide over $1 million in assets and the purposeful establishment of a shell company involving a party named Hayes. I will allow the footage to proceed. However, I want to know exactly how this camera was installed." Ricky was practically hyperventilating, his eyes darting from the screen to Serafina, whose composure was starting to crack. "It was not in a private residence, Your Honor," Ms. Reed corrected, a small knowing smile playing on her lips. "The premises, while occupied by Ms. Hayes, are leased under Mr. Vance's firm's name, Preston, Vance and Associates, and were purchased and furnished using marital funds for business purposes. The espresso machine itself was a housewarming gift from my client to Mr. Vance. It was community property. The legal maneuver was brilliant. The camera wasn't in Serafina's house. It was in the office's temporary, furnished client suite, bought with shared money. On the screen, Ricky and Serafina were still discussing finances, but the tone shifted. "I just wish this were over," Serafina sighed, running a hand through Ricky's hair. "I hate having to pretend I need a job. When can I quit that dreadful gallery position?" "Soon, honey. Soon," Ricky murmured, pulling her close. "Once this is done, we're setting up a new joint trust in the Bahamas. We'll call it the Serafina Fund. We'll travel for 6 months. No more Emaya, no more clients, just us, and our new wealth." Serafina laughed again. This wasn't the taunting laugh from the courtroom. This was a soft, confident, gold-digging laugh. She looked directly at Ricky, her face glowing. "You're the best, Rick. You know, sometimes I think I should have found a richer mark, but you're so good at this. You make the money disappear like magic." Then came the second twist, the one that hit Ricky like a physical blow. Serafina kissed him deeply, then pulled back, her eyes twinkling. "And honestly, the sex is better than I expected for a man your age. You're definitely a step up from Matthew." Ricky's face on the screen tightened. "Who the hell is Matthew?" Serafina waved a dismissive hand. "Nobody important. An old flame. He was a partner in my gallery. But he wasn't as generous as you. He didn't give me the same kind of freedom." She winked. "He was also boring in bed, unlike my generous, successful Ricky." Ricky in the courtroom looked like he'd been slapped. He had always believed Serafina was exclusively, madly in love with him. He had tolerated her arrogance, her extravagance, and her mocking of Emir, because he believed she saw him as the ultimate prize. Now he was just a step up from someone named Matthew. He was simply the better Mark. The camera footage then captured Serafina walking toward the bedroom, singing softly to herself. As she passed a window, she stopped, seemingly addressing her reflection, but the microphone picked up her clear, casual voice. "Just a few more weeks of pretending to be in love. Then it's yachts and zero tax status. Sorry, Emir. You should have been less trusting." She made a face, a grotesque grimace of false sincerity, and then walked out of sight. The footage ended. The lights came up slowly. The silence was profound, suffocating. Ricky Vance was slumped in his chair, not merely defeated, but shattered. His betrayal of Emir was overshadowed by Serafina's calculated, transactional betrayal of him. He was not her hero, he was her mark, and she had just confirmed it to an entire courtroom. Emir was stone-faced. She felt no triumph, only a quiet, resolute sadness that confirmed she had truly wasted 2 decades on a man with no character. Serafina Hayes, however, was no longer laughing. Her face was contorted in horror. Her perfectly applied makeup streaked as tears started to fall, heavy and fast. The realization that her private, cruel words, the casual admission of her mercenary intentions, had been broadcast to a judge who was likely related to the very person mentioned in the financial fraud scheme, was too much. "Your Honor," Ms. Reed stated, cutting through the silence like a scalpel. The footage proves not only calculated financial fraud amounting to over $1 million, but also establishes the clear intent to deceive, which may constitute undue influence on Mr. Vance. We move to freeze all assets immediately, pending a full forensic accounting audit of Preston, Vance and Associates, and we submit a formal complaint to the State Bar for Ricky Vance's professional misconduct. Judge Croft, still staring at the disbelieving Ricky, finally spoke, his voice ice-cold. "Mr. Finch, your client may have just committed financial malfeasance in front of this court. I am ordering an immediate independent audit. The assets mentioned, all accounts related to the Crescent Trust, Hayes Investments LLC, and the firm's operating capital, are frozen. As for Ms. Hayes," he looked directly at the sobbing mistress, "your connection to this fraud will be investigated. This court is recessed until tomorrow morning. Mr. Vance, I advise you to obtain separate counsel for the inevitable State Bar inquiry and the potential criminal proceedings." Ricky didn't move. He just stared at the empty screen. The final image of Seraphina's mocking face burned into his memory. The mistress's cruel, arrogant laugh in the courtroom was gone, replaced by the raw, desperate weeping of a woman whose lucrative scheme had collapsed in a single, devastating playback. The atmosphere in the courthouse hallway immediately following the recess was toxic, a swirling mix of whispered gossip, legal franticness, and sheer, unadulterated rage. Emiah and Miss Reed slipped away quickly through a side door, leaving the legal teams and the disgraced couple to navigate the fallout. Ricky Vance was in shock, his successful, ordered world having imploded in 3 minutes of grainy video. His lawyer, Douglas Finch, was arguing furiously with Judge Croft's clerk, trying desperately to understand the scope of the asset freeze. Seraphina, still crying hysterically, clung to Ricky's arm, not out of affection, but out of fear. "Ricky, you have to fix this. They can't do this. That was private. You promised me everything was protected, that Emia was too stupid to find anything." Ricky finally found his voice, and it was a low, dangerous growl. He ripped his arm away from her grasp. "Stupid. She didn't find it, Seraphina. Our son Jack found it. And you utter, narcissistic idiot. You were talking about other men. You were gloating about setting me up. You called me a mark in the most public way imaginable." Seraphina's tears instantly dried, replaced by defensive fury. "Oh, so that's what this is about? My honesty? You just found out you weren't the only one. Grow up, Ricky. I told you exactly what I was, a trophy, and trophies get paid. You were funding my life, and I was giving you the illusion of youth and excitement. Don't pretend this was a great love story. You're still married to that grey mouse, Emia, who you financially destroyed." "I was building a life with you," Ricky roared, heedless of the few remaining people watching. "No, Ricky," Seraphina sneered, stepping back. "You were buying a fantasy, and you were so blinded by your own ego, and by how easy it was to manipulate your finances, that you didn't notice the actual snake in your bed. I played you, Ricky, just like you played Emia. The difference is, I got caught a little early. But you're going to lose your law license, your firm, and half of what you tried to hide." "Because of me!" Finch rushed over, pulling Ricky away. "Ricky, stop! You need to walk away right now. You cannot be seen arguing with the co-conspirator in a potential fraud case. We need to focus on damage control and proving that you were unaware of the trust's connection to Thomas Hayes." Ricky dragged Finch toward a secluded corner. "Don't you understand, Doug? I knew about Thomas Hayes. He's Seraphina's uncle. She convinced me he was a legitimate financial consultant. It was all her. She set up the LLCs. I just moved the money where she told me it was safe. This was her game." "You are still the attorney, Ricky," Finch hissed back. "You still signed the papers. You still had the fiduciary duty. We need a defense, not a confession. Right now, our only angle is that Amaya obtained the footage illegally, and that she entrapped you into discussing the funds." Meanwhile, Amaya and Miss Reed were in a nearby conference room, calmly reviewing their next move. "That was magnificent, Amaya," Ms. Reed said, pouring Amaya a glass of water. "The judge's reaction was exactly what we needed. He's personally invested now, especially with the potential name connection." Amaya took a shaky sip. "I don't feel magnificent, Evelyn. I feel sick." That was the real Ricky. Cruel, manipulative, and utterly self-interested. And Serafina, she's just sad. A professional opportunist. "She is," Ms. Reed agreed, clicking her pen. "But her true colors saved us. Her comments about the mark severely undermine any claim of undue influence on her part, positioning her as the primary driver of the scheme. More importantly, Ricky is now vulnerable. He's going to turn on her, and she on him. This is exactly how criminal defense teams fracture." "What's the next step?" Amaya asked, her gaze steady now. "The forensic audit will be thorough. Given the direct evidence, they will find every penny. We will recover the full amount of hidden community property, and then some, because the court will likely punish Ricky with a disproportionate distribution of the remaining assets, including the marital home. And his law career is essentially over. The state bar takes financial fraud very seriously." Emir leaned back, exhausted. "I just want the house, and enough money to finish Jack and Clara's college funds. I don't want his firm, I just want peace." "You will get it," Ms. Reed assured her. "But we have one more important piece of leverage. The motive behind the espresso machine. The hidden camera wasn't just a random act of suspicion. It had a trigger." Emir nodded, pulling out a printout from her folder. It was a receipt for an expensive, antique diamond and sapphire necklace, purchased online 3 months ago. The delivery address was Serafina's penthouse. The day Ricky moved out, he told me he was moving into a temporary furnished apartment for focus. He took nothing but clothes. A week later, my heirloom necklace, the one my grandmother gave me, the one I planned to give to Clara on her wedding day, went missing from my locked jewelry box. Ricky claimed he knew nothing. I knew he gave it to Serafina as a welcome gift. That's when Jack and I realized that merely filing for divorce wasn't enough. We needed undeniable proof of his intent to liquidate assets and steal property. Ms. Reed's eyes widened slightly. "Theft of separate property. That is potent, Emir. We save that for the alimony negotiation. When we show that Ricky didn't just hide money, but actively stole a significant family heirloom to gift to his mistress, the judge will see true malice. It elevates the entire case from a tricky divorce to a clear case of malfeasance and theft." Across town, Ricky and Serafina were holed up in Finch's empty conference room. Serafina was on her phone, screaming at someone named Thomas. "The money's frozen, Uncle Thomas. Ricky screwed it up. You need to call your lawyer and tell them you had nothing to do with this. Deny everything." Ricky watched her, his face dark with realization. His love for her, his delusion, had vanished completely, replaced by a searing, self-pitying rage. He wasn't even angry that she was talking to other men anymore. He was angry that she had made him look like a fool and a criminal. He walked over to her and snatched the phone away. "It's over, Serafina. You got caught. And you're not taking me down with you. I'm telling Finch everything, about your uncle, about the LLCs, about how you engineered the transfers. I will cooperate with the audit. I will plead to a lesser civil penalty, and I will implicate you fully. You're disposable. My 20-year career is not." Serafina looked up at him, her eyes wide with genuine terror this time. You wouldn't. Ricky, think about what we had. What we had was a financial transaction, as you so eloquently put it for the court to hear. He spat. The only thing I'm thinking about is saving my own hide. You laughed at my wife. Now watch me weep over the loss of my law license, because you taught me one thing. Always choose yourself first. He threw the phone onto the plush carpet. The sound of the plastic cracking was definitive. The brief, passionate, destructive affair was officially over, ending not with a whimper, but with the sound of a lawyer throwing his mistress under the bus to save his own career. The next 2 weeks were agonizing for Ricky and Amaya, albeit for vastly different reasons. For Amaya, it was the quiet relief of watching justice unfold. For Ricky, it was the slow, brutal dismantling of his entire professional life. The court-ordered forensic audit team, led by the stern, silver-haired Mr. Elias Thorne, descended upon the offices of Preston, Vance and Associates. The direct evidence from the camera footage, specifically the names of the shell companies and the dates of the transfers, gave Thorne's team a surgical precision. They didn't need to hunt for months. They needed only to follow the digital breadcrumbs Ricky and Serafina had so carelessly discussed. The results, delivered in a thick, bound report to Judge Croft, were damning. The total amount of hidden marital assets funneled through the Hayes Investments LLC and the Crescent Trust was confirmed to be $1.4 million. But the audit uncovered something far more extensive, a pattern of similar, smaller diversions dating back almost 5 years, long before Serafina Hayes entered the picture. Ricky had systematically been skimming small percentages of large client settlements, routing them through a complex web of accounts ostensibly set up for offshore tax planning, but which ultimately fed his personal, undisclosed fund. The total hidden wealth reached nearly $2 million. When the audit report was formally entered into the court record, Ricky's partner, Mr. Wallace Preston, a man who had trusted Ricky implicitly for 2 decades, issued an immediate public statement. The firm of Preston, Vance and Associates has been severely betrayed by Ricky Vance. His actions were unilateral, criminal, and in egregious breach of professional and ethical duty. We are taking immediate steps to dissolve his partnership, remove his name from the firm, and will be cooperating fully with the State Bar and any criminal investigations. Ricky Vance was no longer an attorney. He was a pariah. Emir and Ms. Reed met to discuss the audit's findings. Emir was overwhelmed by the scale of the deceit. 5 years, Evelyn, Emir whispered, looking at the summary sheet. He started this 4 years before he even met Serafina. She didn't teach him to be a cheat. She just gave him a bigger reason to be one. Precisely, Miss Reed confirmed. This changes the narrative. Serafina was not the origin of his corruption. She was merely the catalyst for the final, biggest fraud. Ricky Vance is a career financial predator. But this new information gives us immense leverage in the settlement phase. We can pursue not just the marital split of the $2 million, but punitive damages for his years of deceit. Emir nodded, but her gaze was drawn to a different page in the thick document, an expense report from 5 years ago. It detailed a series of extravagant hotel stays and fine dining in New York City, all billed to a client acquisition account. The dates were peculiar. Wait, Amir said, tracing the dates with her finger. Look at these expenditures. They are from October 2020. Ms. Reed checked the date. Yes. What about them? That was the year Clara, our daughter, had her spinal fusion surgery. It was a terrifying time. Ricky was supposed to be in Houston with us, at the clinic. He told me he had an unavoidable emergency arbitration hearing in New York for the Sterling acquisition case. He said the firm was depending on him. Emia's voice was flat, devoid of emotion, the kind of stillness that preceded a catastrophic emotional break. She pulled up an old text message on her phone, showing the screen to Ms. Reed. The text was from Ricky to Emia, dated October 14th, 2020. "So sorry, honey. The Sterling meeting ran late. Major client crisis. Love you and Clara. Be there tomorrow afternoon. Flight permitting." Emia matched the date on the text to the hotel receipt. The receipt showed a 2-night stay at the St. Regis, New York, including a $500 dinner for two at a Michelin-starred restaurant. He wasn't in an arbitration hearing, Evelyn. He was on a romantic weekend with a client acquisition. Emia's breath hitched. He left me alone in a Houston hospital, terrified that my daughter wouldn't walk again, to be with another woman. The discovery of the hidden money was betrayal of trust and finances. The discovery of this lie was a betrayal of her deepest, most fundamental maternal fear. It was unforgivable. The next day, Ricky, now represented by a criminal defense lawyer named Mr. Grantley, stood before Judge Croft for the continuation of the divorce proceedings. Finch was gone. He had refused to represent Ricky in the criminal aspect of the case. Ricky looked haggard. His suit was rumpled, his eyes bloodshot. He had lost the smug arrogance that had defined the opening hearing. Ms. Reed rose, her voice calm but penetrating. "Your Honor, we have reviewed the forensic audit. We now move beyond the immediate fraud involving Serafina Hayes to address a documented pattern of deceit and financial misconduct that predates the affair by nearly 4 years, totaling over $2 million in hidden assets." She then dropped the final, personal bomb. "Furthermore, Your Honor, we are introducing into evidence an expense report and supporting texts which demonstrate that Mr. Vance fabricated a crisis, utilizing his professional duties as an elaborate cover to conceal an affair. This incident occurred at a time of extreme vulnerability for my client and her family. On the dates of October 14th and 15th, 2020, when Mr. Vance claimed to be in an essential emergency arbitration in New York, he was in fact on a luxurious holiday with an unnamed associate. This was the exact time his minor daughter, Clara Vance, was undergoing a critical spinal fusion surgery in a hospital 1,000 miles away. A gasp rippled through the gallery. Judge Croft's expression hardened further. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about monstrous moral failure. "Mr. Grantley, do you contest the authenticity of these records?" Judge Croft asked, his voice low. Grantley, a seasoned criminal lawyer, knew a losing battle when he saw one. "Your Honor, we do not contest the authenticity of the firm's expense reports or the text messages. We submit that, while these facts speak to poor judgment, they are not strictly relevant to the distribution of marital assets." "I disagree, counsel," Judge Croft stated firmly. "They speak volumes about the character and credibility of the party attempting to conceal and divert said assets. They speak to the entire history of the marital estate and the financial abuse perpetrated upon Mrs. Vance. This behavior is profoundly relevant to any claim of fault and will certainly factor into the final distribution." Ricky closed his eyes, his head dropping to his chest. The old lie, the lie he had considered a necessary evil to cover a quick fling, had now surfaced years later to destroy him utterly. It was far more devastating than the Serafina footage. The Serafina footage ended his career. The old lie ended his reputation as a father and a man. Emia watched him, and for the first time, the stone wall around her heart cracked. Not with sadness, but with a profound, final sense of clarity. The man she had loved had never existed. The atmosphere in the court for the next session was tense. The evidence of Ricky's systemic fraud and personal cruelty was now public record. The focus shifted from proving the fraud to determining the remedy and finalizing the separation of the marital estate. Emir and Ms. Reed knew they had Ricky boxed in financially, but there was one loose end: the stolen diamond and sapphire necklace. Proving theft would reinforce the punitive damages. As the hearing commenced, Ricky's criminal defense lawyer, Mr. Grantley, stood to address the court, attempting to minimize his client's personal culpability. Your Honor, Mr. Vance accepts the findings of the forensic audit regarding the undisclosed accounts. He is prepared to cooperate fully in the distribution of these marital assets. However, we contend that the immediate catalyst for the majority of the recent transfers was undue influence exerted by Ms. Serafina Hayes, who has since confessed to viewing Mr. Vance as a financial mark. Mr. Vance was manipulated. Miss Reed stood, a small, knowing smile on her face. The defense's attempt to paint Mr. Vance as a naive victim is contradicted by the 5 years of fraud that predated Ms. Hayes's involvement, Your Honor. Mr. Vance is no innocent, and since the defense wishes to discuss Ms. Hayes, the court should know that we are now prepared to address the matter of the separate property theft. She addressed Ricky directly. Mr. Vance, where is the antique diamond and sapphire necklace that belonged to your wife's grandmother? The one that disappeared from the marital home the week you moved out? Ricky shifted uncomfortably. He had anticipated this. I don't know anything about a necklace, Miss Reed. I haven't been in the house since I left. A woman in the gallery, a mature, elegantly dressed woman Emir vaguely recognized from Ricky's firm's social events, suddenly stood up. She was Mrs. Deborah Preston, the wife of Ricky's longtime partner, Wallace Preston. Judge Croft looked at her sharply. Ma'am, you must be silent in the gallery, or you will be asked to leave. Mrs. Preston held up a hand, addressing the judge with quiet authority. Your Honor, with respect, I believe I am a relevant witness in this matter. I request permission to offer testimony. Ms. Reed and Mr. Grantley exchanged shocked glances. Emir was baffled. Judge Croft, sensing the dramatic shift, agreed. Swear in the witness. Deborah Preston took the stand, her gaze unwavering as she looked at Ricky, who now looked truly terrified. He knew Deborah despised Serafina, but he couldn't imagine what she knew about the necklace. Mrs. Preston, Ms. Reed began, how are you familiar with Mr. Vance and Ms. Hayes? Ricky was my husband's partner. Serafina was introduced as a junior consultant to the firm last year. I met them both socially, Deborah stated clearly. Do you know anything about a diamond and sapphire necklace? Deborah nodded. Yes, I saw it. About 3 months ago, I was having lunch with Serafina at the Ritz. She was flaunting a stunning antique necklace, boasting that her sugar daddy, her words, not mine, had given it to her as a promise of their future together. Did she say who the sugar daddy was? She didn't have to. Ricky walked in 10 minutes later and joined us, kissing her on the cheek and commenting on how beautiful the necklace looked on her. Ms. Reed pressed her advantage. Did she mention the origin of the necklace? Deborah hesitated, then looked straight at Emir. Yes. She gloated about it, actually. She said, and I quote, "It belonged to his mousy little wife's grandmother. He said she'd never wear it again, and it would look far better on someone who appreciates true luxury. It was practically begging to be liberated." The air in the courtroom became frigid. Ricky had not just stolen the necklace, he had openly mocked Emir and her family legacy to his mistress, who then bragged about it to his partner's wife. But Deborah Preston wasn't finished. This was the final, deepest twist. And, Your Honor, I didn't just hear her bragging. I did something about it. She reached into her large designer handbag and placed a small velvet jewelry box on the witness stand. The night after that lunch, I called my husband, Wallace. I told him I knew Ricky was stealing from the firm and cheating on Emir, which Wallace already suspected, as Ricky's behavior had become erratic. Wallace told me to let it go, to stay out of it. But when I heard about the necklace, about how petty and cruel Ricky was being, I knew I had to act. Emir was a good woman, and Ricky was destroying her life. She opened the box. Inside, the large sapphire stones sparkled under the fluorescent lights. I went to Serafina's penthouse the next day, under the guise of inviting her to a charity luncheon. I managed to slip this out of her dressing table while she was on the phone. I have had it in my possession for the last 3 months, waiting for the right moment. I didn't want Serafina to sell it, and I wanted Amaya to have her grandmother's legacy back. She slid the box across the table toward Miss Reed. It should be returned to its rightful owner. Amaya stared at the necklace, tears finally blurring her vision. It wasn't the diamonds or the sapphire that mattered. It was the kindness of a stranger, a silent partner who saw an injustice and risked her own comfort to correct it. Deborah Preston had provided the final, undeniable proof of Ricky's malicious intent, not just in fraud, but in personal property theft, and she had done so out of a pure sense of moral duty. Ricky, beaten, his reputation utterly destroyed, looked at the necklace, then at Deborah, then finally, shamefully, at Emir. He had lost everything: his money, his career, his mistress, and now, publicly, his last shred of human dignity. Ms. Reed gently picked up the box. "Your Honor, the return of this stolen property, courtesy of the courageous testimony of Mrs. Preston, clearly establishes Mr. Vance's intent to deprive my client not only of community assets, but also of her separate, sentimental property. This crime demands the harshest civil penalty." Judge Croft didn't hesitate. He looked directly at Ricky. "Mr. Vance, you have not only defrauded your partner and your wife, but you have also demonstrated calculated, malicious contempt for your family's emotional and financial well-being. This court will ensure that Mrs. Vance is fully compensated." The matter of the necklace was resolved. Amaya had her grandmother's jewelry back, a symbol of a legacy that Ricky had tried and failed to erase. The courtroom reconvened 2 days later, not for more testimony, but for Judge Andrew Croft to deliver his findings and final ruling on the divorce settlement and the disposition of the assets. The room was packed, the saga of the wealthy Boston attorney and the laughing mistress turned weeping co-conspirator having drawn significant media attention. Ricky Vance sat alone at the defense table, his criminal lawyer, Mr. Grantley, positioned slightly behind him, adopting a posture of resigned defeat. Serafina Hayes was conspicuously absent, having been advised by her own newly retained, separate counsel to avoid the courthouse entirely. Judge Croft, appearing more formal than ever, opened the session. He did not mince words. This case, Vance versus Vance, is unique not for the breakdown of the marriage, a common tragedy in this court, but for the calculated, systematic, and sustained financial abuse perpetrated by the respondent, Mr. Ricky Vance, upon the petitioner, Mrs. Amaya Vance, and upon his professional partners. He spoke of the financial fraud first. The court accepts the findings of the independent forensic audit, confirming that Mr. Vance actively concealed over $2 million in marital assets over a period of 5 years, beginning well before the relationship with Ms. Serafina Hayes. The subsequent fraud involving Ms. Hayes was an escalation, not an aberration. This is clear and convincing evidence of financial malfeasance and willful dissipation of marital property. He then addressed the personal cruelty. The testimony regarding the stolen separate property, the antique sapphire necklace, and the testimony establishing Mr. Vance's callous fabrication of his whereabouts during his daughter's critical surgery on October 14, 2020, demonstrates a pattern of profound moral turpitude and calculated emotional abandonment. This behavior is unforgivable and is a direct attack on the petitioner's peace, security, and familial integrity. Ricky's face remained numb, but his jaw trembled. Judge Croft announced the financial distribution, a verdict that was designed to be both remedial and punitive. The hidden assets, $2,000. Due to the willful concealment and dissipation, the court awarded 100% of the recovered hidden assets to Mrs. Emia Vance. This was an unprecedented distribution, effectively punishing Ricky for the fraud by awarding the entire sum to the victim. The marital home, the primary residence, valued at $1.5 million, would be awarded solely to Mrs. Emia Vance. The court cited Ricky's use of the firm's funds and time to pursue his illicit relationship as a contributing factor to the marital breakdown, justifying the award of the home as part of the asset correction. Retirement and remaining accounts. The remaining legitimate marital retirement accounts and investments would be split 50-50 as standard. Total outcome: Emia Vance walked away with the family home, the full $2 million in recovered hidden assets, and half of the remaining liquid accounts, giving her not just financial security, but a substantial, well-deserved fortune. Judge Croft dismissed Ricky's initial proposal of a 2-year, declining rehabilitative alimony package. Given the petitioner's 18-year career sacrifice and the respondent's subsequent, deliberate, malicious attempts to financially cripple her, this court finds Mr. Vance entirely responsible for Mrs. Vance's current employment disadvantage. Mr. Vance will pay lifetime spousal support to Mrs. Vance, calculated at 35% of his current and future income, until such time as Mrs. Vance either remarries or the death of either party. The lifetime alimony was a crushing blow, ensuring that even if Ricky rebuilt a smaller private practice, Emia would always retain a significant share of his earnings. Judge Croft then delivered the most devastating judgment, effectively sealing Ricky's fate. The evidence presented, particularly the footage documenting the explicit conspiracy to defraud and the use of the firm's resources to fund criminal activity, has already been forwarded to the State Bar Disciplinary Committee and the District Attorney's Office. He paused, looking directly at Ricky. In civil proceedings, the court cannot impose criminal sanction, but it can recognize professional fault. The court finds that Ricky Vance, having deliberately misused his professional expertise and position as an officer of the court for criminal financial gain, is unfit to practice law. The State Bar will make the final determination, but for the purposes of this dissolution, Mr. Vance's financial capacity will be assessed against a significant reduction in earning potential due to this imminent professional demise. The verdict was absolute. Ricky was financially ruined, stripped of the vast majority of his wealth, forced to pay lifetime alimony, and facing imminent disbarment and criminal charges. Later that day, Emia stood in her kitchen, the one Ricky had called a museum of misery, sipping tea with Ms. Reed. "It's over," Emia said, the finality of the statement sinking in. "It is," Ms. Reed agreed, "and justice was served. You are secure, Emia. You have the house, the money, and your name is cleared of the implied madness Ricky tried to paint you with." They discussed the fate of the others. Ricky Vance. He was cooperating with the DA's office in hopes of avoiding jail time, likely facing severe probation, massive financial penalties, and certain disbarment. He was last seen moving into a small, rented apartment, abandoned by his former life and career. Serafina Hayes. She had been forced to liquidate all assets Ricky had given her, and she was under investigation for her role in the financial fraud. Her uncle, Thomas Hayes, was also implicated. The gold-digging fantasy had crumbled, leaving her facing not luxury, but significant legal debt and the loss of her social standing. The laugh had indeed turned into a permanent, crushing financial woe. Deborah Preston. She was hailed by the media as a moral hero and earned the deep respect of Emir, who promised to maintain a lifelong friendship with her silent partner. Emir looked at the mahogany jewelry box on the counter, containing the retrieved sapphire necklace. She hadn't just gotten her money back. She had reclaimed her dignity and self-respect. The laughter of the mistress, once a symbol of her humiliation, had become the trigger for the truth that ultimately saved her. A year passed. The storm of the divorce, the audit, and the criminal proceedings had finally subsided, leaving behind a profound stillness in Emir Vance's life. The family home, once a prison of Ricky's ambition and Emir's deferred dreams, was now her sanctuary. Ricky Vance was disbarred 6 months after Judge Croft's ruling. He received a 1-year suspended sentence, massive fines, and extensive probation in exchange for fully cooperating with the investigation into Serafina Hayes and her uncle's shell companies. He had lost the firm, the prestige, and the respect of the entire Boston legal community. The once slick attorney was now working as a paralegal for a discount legal services firm. His income, a fraction of his former glory, guaranteeing Emire's lifetime alimony payments, remained a constant, humiliating reminder of his fall. Serafina Hayes was less fortunate. Due to the explicit nature of the taped conversation and her role in establishing the financial shell game, she was prosecuted for conspiracy and was currently serving a short prison sentence. Her laughter had indeed cost her everything, replaced by the grim reality of a jumpsuit and a criminal record. Emir, however, was thriving. The financial windfall, the house, the $2 million and the secure alimony removed all financial anxiety, allowing her to pursue the life she had postponed. She had reconnected with her passion for landscape design. She didn't need the income, but she needed the purpose. She converted Ricky's unused, overly large home office into a bright, airy studio, opening her own small, boutique design firm, Vance Gardens. One brisk autumn afternoon, Emir stood on the porch, looking at the familiar rhododendron bush Ricky had mocked. It was bursting with late-season blooms, vibrant and resilient. It was a metaphor for her own life. Her children, Jack and Clara, had come through the ordeal stronger. Jack, the genius behind the surveillance, had used the whole experience to focus his college thesis on digital forensics and legal ethics. Clara, now completely recovered from her surgery, was studying pre-med, finding her motivation in helping others through crises. They both visited often, seeing their mother not as the broken wife Ricky had left, but as the strong matriarch who had fought back and won. Emir opened a small, polished wooden box. Inside lay the antique sapphire necklace, cleaned and gleaming. She didn't wear it often, but she kept it close. It wasn't just a piece of jewelry. It was a tangible reminder of the power of truth and the surprising kindness of strangers, specifically Deborah Preston, with whom Emir had lunch once a month. Her victory wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming the narrative of her life. Ricky's story was one of arrogance and decline. Her story was one of silent strength and rebirth. Emir walked into her studio and sat down at her drafting table. She was sketching a complex garden layout for her newest client. The door chime rang, and she looked up to see Ms. Evelyn Reed standing there, holding a bottle of champagne. "To 1 year of freedom, Emir," Evelyn smiled, setting the bottle down. "And to the firm's newest and most fascinating client. Wallace Preston is formally dissolving the old firm and starting a new, smaller, more ethical practice. He needs your firm to design the roof garden for his new downtown office." Emir laughed, a clear, joyous sound that held no hint of mockery or bitterness. Wallace is finally free too. It seems everyone has found their way out of Ricky's shadow. "Not Seraphina," Evelyn noted wryly. "No. But I feel no pleasure in that," Emir admitted, looking out the window. "Ricky and Seraphina made their own choices. They chose greed and contempt. I chose truth. The difference is, my choice gave me a future." Evelyn pointed to a news article on Emir's desk. The headline was about Ricky's disbarment and the hefty financial penalties. "Ricky tried to spin the story for the press one last time, blaming you for entrapment," Evelyn said. Emir calmly picked up the paper and placed it directly into the recycling bin. "That's the difference, Evelyn. He thought he was playing a game. He thought I was just the passive background character in his life. But when I played the footage, I didn't just expose him. I took control of the script. Ricky Vance is not the hero of his life. He's the cautionary tale in mine. And the story is finally over." Emir picked up the bottle of champagne. "Let's toast to new beginnings, Evelyn. To the end of the drama and the start of a quiet, honest life." They clinked glasses, the crystal sound a crisp, clean counterpoint to the distant, chaotic noise of the city. Emir had won back more than just money. She had won back her peace, her purpose, and her own beautiful, unshakable future. And that is the staggering true story of the moment Emir Vance turned the tables, when the mistress's arrogant laugh was silenced forever by a single, hidden camera. Can you imagine the sheer nerve, the calculated cruelty, and the ultimate, spectacular failure of their deceit? Ricky and Seraphina thought they were untouchable, but they forgot the most powerful weapon in any conflict: the truth. The hidden camera footage didn't just win a divorce, it exposed a criminal conspiracy and reclaimed a woman's entire future. If this story of betrayal, revenge, and ultimate redemption shocked you, smash that like button. Let us know in the comments below. What was the most shocking betrayal you witnessed in this courtroom drama? Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that the wicked never prosper. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more true stories where the silent victims find their powerful voice.